Hello friends, welcome to the video about doing your co-teaching demo for the young adult literature class. I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of, fine-tuning insights into the process. Of course, there's lots of instructions for you that you can spend some time on, but hopefully this will clarify any questions that you have as you are working with your partner. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so first, let's take a look at our course. If you go ahead and look at assignments, you can see co-teaching demo, and you can just click on this and it will take you right down to the co-teaching demo, which is 25% of your grade. So you can read this. I'm not going to read it all to you, but it's really important to first take a look at this co-teaching model article. Co-teaching means there's two of you, and at every point, each of you should be doing something. So some of you could take the lead, you can split up, but there's a couple different co-teaching models. And so it's important to think about this because this is going to be, when you are student teaching, you're going to be doing a lot of co-teaching at first, especially. And then you might have some visitors in your class or support staff that you want to make sure that you're planning for something them to do, so you're not just having somebody sit in the corner. And anytime you're observing, also you can think about these different co-teaching models to see if there's a way that you can support the teacher that you're observing. So these are the different co-teaching models. One teach, one observe. We don't recommend this unless the person observing is looking for evidence of learning. So observing does not mean sitting back. It means getting right in there and monitoring the students and what they're doing. Maybe it's monitoring the chat. Maybe it's having side chats with students. Maybe it's looking at a different site in order to see if students are like working on a PowerPoint together or something like that. One teach, one assist is if one is directly instructing and the other one is helping individual students. So just noticing if someone needs extra help. Parallel teaching is when you divide the class in two and you're teaching the same information at the same time. So that might be in two separate breakout rooms. Station teaching is if you divide the class into a couple different groups and you rotate the teachers between the stations. There's alternative teaching. One teacher takes the bulk of the students, the other takes a small group. And then team teaching when you're sort of tag teaming. So take a look at this and decide as partners which models you like to use. And you might try a few of these, one at the beginning, one at the middle, one at the end, whatever works for you. The next thing is just noticing all the different parts. So you're going to first use the formal lesson plan to help write your plan. You're going to share that with me by Sunday evening so I can give you feedback before you move forward and prepare any of the materials that you need. So this is a pretty, this models off of what I did in class, our week 2. You're going to begin with a write-in, and the write-in is to have a question or scenario or image that gets your students thinking about what you're going to be talking about that day. Look at the lessons in this book is Anti-Racist for some ideas. So you could see I used the neighborhood sketch as an activity. So you might look ahead into the book to see what activities relate to the kind of things that we're talking about. But there are other alternatives too. If this is the first time we're looking at the book, you might look at biographical information, so an image, a video, an excerpt. Talk about the genre, the narrator, and the perspective. And so if we're splitting it over 2 classes, the perspective of the narrator might change as the book goes on. So you do want to address that. Side on craft that you're going to do a mini lesson. So this document takes you through that. You want to mix it up so we're not always doing the same craft. So I focused on syntax. You might focus on imagery, punctuation, dialogue, sensory language, diction. And all the questions are right here for you to help lead a discussion or analysis of it. So as you noticed when I did my demonstration lesson, I showed a picture of the book. I talked through some of these questions, and then I asked everyone to kind of find another section and do the same thing. So that's sort of what you're illuminating. And you can do this in partners or in small groups, but the questions are here to focus on. And you can do a couple different passages too. And then the next is leading a discussion about the text or article. There's lots of different ways we can do the discussion. Last week, I assigned roles and used the fishbowl. You can have a read in. I think we'd like to maybe try this, but it would be really cool if like when everyone just kind of changes their name, like renames themselves with the page number or the section that they want to talk about. And that way everyone can see right away if there's similar page numbers or similar sections, and they can build on each other's ideas. I think it might also help for in your lesson plan to give your students an opportunity to write some questions. That's something I did not do in our group, and I think that I should have. I should have paused and let everyone find a passage and decide on some questions. But I think writing questions is kind of an art. And so this document here is something you can share with students. And there's a couple different sentence stems that will help you help your students come up with questions to ask each other. You can do small groups. You can do a silent discussion. So you could use Jamboard and write like a question on each Jamboard, or you can use slides and then give editing rights to your class, your students, and they can put post-it notes on the question and then move to another slide and put post-it notes and build on each other's questions. So that's another way you could do discussion if you want to try that one out. And then I have a list of other kinds of questions that you could use in your group or silent discussion. And there's a bunch on like identity, diversity, justice, and action, and craft. So these are other questions you can pose as a discussion leader or give students to think about or talk about in their small group and report back. So lots of different ways that you can do a discussion. And then here's closure. So you're going to end with something for the students to do, just sort of share out and reflect. And for that, there's some ideas here too. A 3-2-1, a 1-minute paper, I think pair share, a little jigsaw, quiz show. And so here's some different kinds of post assessments and reflections that you can have your students do before you close out. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the co-teaching. Now, I think that the part that's overwhelming is looking at the formal lesson plan. All right, and so I've already started one for Jennifer and Mac, who are going to be our first presenters. So I'm just going to kind of take a look at that, at theirs. Okay, so these are all pretty similar. So we've made so if you're here and you click on the formal lesson plan, you can see it opens as a docx. Right, and so I'd rather you open it and then share it with each other and with me. So how would you do that? You go to File, save as Google Docs, this one, not make a copy. Otherwise it will make another docx and we can't co-edit. Save as Google Docs and then share it with me and share it with your partner. So all three of us have access to the same document. I would also rename it so I don't have a whole bunch of documents shared with me that just say lesson plan and I don't know what it's about. So you can name your book or your names. That's fine too. So what we've done here is we've put Apple because we're looking at the book Apple, and Jennifer and Mac are the teachers. So this is the document that they're going to collaborate on, and I'm just going to talk through a little bit of it. If you've never done this before, and for many of you, if you're taking the YA Lit course number, this might be the first time you're looking at a formal lesson plan. So we're just learning about it. We're figuring it out. We're getting to know how to write lesson plans. And so if this is unfamiliar or uncomfortable to you, that's okay. Like this is a place to learn and to try things. So we're going to go through it, but if you have questions, let me know. I don't expect it to be perfect. I don't expect you to know everything. This is a whole part of learning is I'll give you feedback on it. And so we can, anyway, so we could just think about that. Okay. So your lesson title, and maybe you put in something temporary because you may not know what the title is. I usually don't know the title of my story or article that I'm writing until I've already written it. So you might just kind of put that off until the end. The lesson description, again, that might be something that you want to put off until you've talked it all the way through. But here's a sample of what you might write. So the lesson description is the students will explore a big concept like memoir, like historical intergenerational trauma, like magical realism, like what are the other topics on her thing? Oh, speculative fiction or something. And they will read closely for an academic skill. This is where the craft comes in. So you can choose craft, imagery, figurative language, metaphor, dialogue, punctuation, any of the things that you'd selected. As they practice, and then here's something new, a social emotional skill. So always when we're learning content, we're also practicing, our self-awareness, our relationships with our classmates, our decision making. So something that you think that the students will practice. And since we're doing discussion, they're probably going to practice social awareness or relationship skills or even self-awareness. So you might ask your students to make a goal for what they want to work on. And if you click on here, this will tell you a little bit more about some of the goals for social emotional awareness. And this isn't a way of controlling, but it's just being aware that we're in this space with lots of different people, and learning is cognitive as much as it is affective. And so just recognizing that we all come to this space with different histories and present lives and fears and insecurities and interests, and then of course skills and preferences and joy and all these different things that we come to. So just a couple things that you want to just keep in mind as you're teaching, because we're not just teaching the concept, we're teaching human beings, and we want to make sure that we're offering them a space to just engage with one another and also discover things about themselves. And so one of the reasons I ask everyone to turn on the camera is because of self-awareness. Like recognizing your facial expressions and body language as you're communicating with other people. So if your camera's off or you're looking away and I'm talking, it's kind of a sense that you may not be engaged, or you may be confused, or you might be listening, but I don't know that you're listening because your body language is communicating something different. And so just being a little bit aware of that. Self-management, some students might have this as their goal. Social awareness, solving conflicts or having a different perspective. So that might be something, if we have a conversation that might have some opinions or some bias in there, just recognizing them, practicing listening skills. So in general, we'll use this sort of relationship skills goal because we're practicing a dialogic classroom and having discussions. And so we're going to practice listening skills and relating to our peers in that way. So that might be a good goal. Our lesson is going to be about an hour. You can put in this information. The source of the lesson is original to you and to us, or you could say it's built off my model. The learning environment, since we're online, you can put this here, but when you're teaching, you want to think about how the desks are grouped, where students are moving at the beginning, middle, and end, because you want them to move. If you are in online learning, you might also think about partners, things you can do: partners, small group, whole group, individual. So they have lots of different ways of using even the online learning environment. Okay, so here's the really meaty part, and that you can't really move forward until you have a clear sense that you and your co-teacher have really discussed this. So, if you've read Apple Skin to the Core, and so you have your book and you have, yeah, we already talked about this. So if you finished reading it, so I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but the story is from his youth until he leaves the reservation, in which we knew that was coming. And so that's really his journey, and it's a journey into his past, into his own history. But then there's layers of other people's past with his mother and his family and his home. And, and he's left the res, but he's not very far away from the res. And so he's always holding on to the other people who have left, or people who were forced to leave. And always just the presence and the existence of the culture as others are trying to erase it. And so there's lots of layers of conversation in here. But we're really, this week, we're thinking about historical trauma. And so maybe that's what is historical trauma. And then for the skill, you might be looking at metaphor or imagery. And then how is metaphor or imagery related to Native American experiences in historical trauma? And then why is historical trauma an important genre or topic in Native American literature? So by the end of our time together, you want everyone to be able to answer those questions. So what does it mean to understand? So what understanding is desired? This is something you have to know the answer to before you begin. So it's not enough just to come up with these questions, but you want to have a sense of what this might look like. And it's going to vary because these are really complex, nuanced, sort of abstract concepts, and it doesn't really have a right or wrong answer. But here you want to talk about what you want people to sort of understand, or what might be open to a revelation or an exploration. So here's just a few, so here's with magical realism, here's a couple understandings. So focus on this book. So what might be some, the desired understanding is maybe that how Eric Gansworth used imagery, the apple imagery throughout the text, and how that changed, which is symbolic also, or how he used photographs in here, the images of his family, to be part of his narrative. And so again, you're connecting the topic of historical trauma with the concept of imagery. And so that's kind of how you're trying to combine these. And then thinking about what key terms that you would need to know. So what might be some of those key terms: magical realism, metaphor in this, historical trauma, imagery, symbolism. You might want them to be able to identify examples, maybe criteria for historical trauma, or criteria for identifying imagery as it changes something. This is what your goal is going to be, what you want them to know, and what you want them to be able to do. Since you're practicing craft, you want them to be able to notice whatever craft lesson you decide on. But where are they going to demonstrate that? On Jamboard, on a slides, on a document, in the chat. If you want them to analyze the craft in the text, you want them to do it with a partner, a whole class, or in a document, or on a slideshow. You want them to be able to give an example of something. Where do they do that? Do they do that on an exit slip? Do they do that in a drawing? Do they just do that verbally? So these are just all the different choices that teachers make when they're designing. And then this is sort of a complicated part here. What do they need to know before beginning? So they have to have read this, right? They have to have read some of it, been in our class last week to have some discussion. They probably have to have read the article for the week. So what are the bits and pieces that they have to come with? And then what are you going to do if people don't come with that information, if they don't do the reading, if they don't have the book? So, maybe you'll have extra pictures of the pages that you want to look at, or you want to have like a little cheat sheet with some examples that you can share with someone. You really want to make it accessible to everyone in the class, and you may not know that they don't have certain things unless you ask. And that's what's the great thing about having a co-teacher, is that the co-teacher can notice if someone's doesn't have their camera on or isn't engaging with the chat. You can send a quick message and say, what do you need? How can I help? Do you need a picture of this? Do you need a summary of this? Like, how can I help you engage? Because if they didn't do the reading, or they're not prepared, it doesn't mean they can't take something away from the conversation. It doesn't mean they can't still meet some of the goals, which is why it's important to have the materials ready to go and just anticipate that. So what materials do they need? So maybe you take a couple pictures of here, a couple pictures from here, put them in slides to share with people, maybe create a PDF that you can share. If you want to have, pictures ready to go, if you want to look at the, so like in here, maybe you want to look at this imagery, this imagery of the book, and then maybe compare it to this imagery, right? And so how can you do that if some of your students are listening to the audiobook? Well, they have missed out on this piece because they don't have the hard copy, but it's not their fault. I mean, they chose to do the audiobook. So how do you make this accessible? You have to take some photographs. You may just use your camera, put them in the slideshow, and you can have those ready to go. So data collection is just really, how are you going to track that everybody's engaged? And so last week we did the spider web. I have at the bottom here notes, a place for, I don't know why this is, there's so much space here. Let me see if I can remove some of it. So I just put down here a list of our class names. So you and your partner can just kind of keep track of who you sort of checked in on, how things are going. Also, like really insightful comments or page numbers that they talk about. This is data collection. This is you tracking the conversation, tracking their write-in, their discussion, their exit slip. And so you might, if the goal is for them to be able to identify imagery or analyze imagery, you might put the goal, this is the goal, analyze imagery. It's on Jamboard. And so as everyone's practicing that, you might just put a little, check mark in here, or, what kind of system you want, just with the note that it's done. If you checked, but they weren't quite ready yet, you can put a question mark and then come back and check it later. If you gave them support or clarified, and then that led to success, you can put that in there. And then maybe at the end, they do their exit slip, like the 3, 2, 1. And that's something that you look at after class is over. Again, you can just put, a question, marks in here. If something's missing, you can put a question mark, and that way, you can follow up with the student later, like I didn't find it, or I can't see it. And what's great is if you have a co-teacher, then you can you can decide, like someone's gonna check on the exit slip, someone's gonna check on the analysis, someone's going to check on the discussion question. And so you can see this is a place where you are just keeping track of everybody's learning. And this is what you would do as a teacher. Like, it's kind of like a grade book, but I don't think about it as grades, as I just think about their evidence of engagement, of learning. And it's a way of also making sure you don't forget anybody. If you might recognize, oh gosh, I don't even remember checking in on so-and-so. And then next time you see them to check in, or the two of you as co-teachers can look it up, can check in on that person. Okay, and so here's the lesson plan details, and this is where you just kind of go to the standards, because you're going to talk about historical trauma, you're going to talk about imagery, there's going to be some class discussion. So just locating those standards here and just plug them in. I was just looking at grade 10. You can look at any high school grade level. So there's links to that here. Their performance task, just again, what are they going to do? Is it the write-in? Is it a close reading? Are they going to do a survey? Are they going to do a questionnaire? Are they going to do a double entry? Are they going to do a gallery walk? Are they going to do Jamboard? Are they going to do like columns? You know, this is what are they going to do that you're going to look at, and whatever they're going to do is what you're going to put down here, right? Okay. And so the evidence, how do you know it's successful, right? This is the next question. So they do the write-in. If that's say they do a write-in, so under the write, most of you will just have write-in. Okay. How do you know that they actually were successful in thinking about historical, just history or our stories or things like that? So how do you know? Well, maybe they all posted it on KidBlog and it has like 3 events on their timeline. That's how you know they did it. Or maybe they held it up to the camera and talked with a partner in a breakout room. That's another way, right? So whatever you're asking them to do, how do you know it was successful? What are you looking for? And maybe you have a checklist of 3 things that they need to do or something like that. And if you're asking the students to reflect on it, maybe when they're done, you come back and you say, tell me, you know, 3, if it was great, if it was a positive experience, 2, if you have questions, 1, if this was really hard or something like that. And the students just put that, you know, in the chat, and then, you know, or what's great about the participant, I don't know if you can see this, you can have students put yes, no, I think that's, you might be able to do other things. Oh, or reactions. They might be able to say, give me a thumbs up if that went well, or a thumbs down if that was really hard. And if someone says thumbs down, then one of you or the co-teacher can go in the chat and find out what's going on and how you can help them. So it's a way of how do you know it was successful, and then how are you communicating and getting feedback from your students? Okay, I'm going to delete this because I'm not saying that you have to do this. Jennifer and Mac, I'm just saying, but you will do the write-in. So the write-in can go here. This is the discussion. But you have to say what kind of discussion you're having. So you want to add those details in there, okay? And now this is where we get to the lesson. Okay, so all of that is just prepping. And now what are you going to do? So we're going to put this in first person language to help you think about what you're going to say and how you're going to move between these things, right? So it's great whenever you start a lesson with your students for you to be at the door greeting them, right? But it's hard to do that online, hard to do that because we're just pretending as a demo here. But here's what I just want to suggest. Okay, so maybe you and your partner have a screen, right, where you have the picture that you're going to have them write about, and then you're just kind of chatting, right, chatting, but use people's names. So you say, at Jennifer, how's it going today? Or tell me a great thing that happened today. Or at, you know, at Mac, how are you? What's happening? You know, just welcoming, you know, any kind of like chit chat, maybe if you, even better, if you read their literary blog, which would be really great. If you read their blog or double entries on KidBlog, you can say, oh, I really like that idea that you had when you did the Marxist lens reading of the chapter, or that queer lens analysis was awesome. So just as people are sort of like getting ready, you can say some of those things in the chat. So the write-in is, once you decide on what your write-in is going to be, I would put a link here or a screenshot. And then what are you going to say? Like, how are you going to do that? So if you remember, for me, last week, we wrote, we did neighborhood. We wrote our neighborhood, right? Right. Okay. So I think I started with a prompt of, you know, so I will begin by, or you might say who, because there's 2 of you. So who's going to do this? Jennifer. I will begin by showing a picture of X and tell them why. Then Then maybe model how I started. And then check for understanding before giving everyone, 10 minutes to do the activity. They will then hold it up or go into partners in breakout rooms to share, or go on, however you want to do that. Like, this is whatever you're going to do the write-in, but, talk through how you're going to do it. And then the students, or what the students are going to do. And then what the co-teacher is doing during this time. And again, go back to that co-teaching list so you can see what their role is going to be doing and what they can be doing during that time. Transition, you're going to review the goals, like historical trauma. If you want them to know up front, you may not want them to know, you may want them to question, or imagery or metaphor. You can say that, or you might want them to guess it. It's up to you how you want to do it. But say sort of the goal or what you're going to do, so people don't know what to expect and they know sort of the routine that's coming. Then move into the craft lesson. And so last time I did sort of a direct instruction. This is syntax, this is enjambment, this is how I look at it. Now you give it a try. So you can do it that way. But you can also show a picture and say, let's talk about this picture. What do you notice? Let's look at this picture. What do you notice? How are those different? What might they mean? How could we interpret them? And then you kind of lead a discussion, modeling how to look for imagery, and then move into another example and then give your students an opportunity to practice. So again, you're going to just be kind of narrating how you might get into this. For the discussion, again, you're going to narrate what you decided you want them to do, what format, how they're going to practice, and then closure, same thing. So this is where you're going to kind of talk through what you want them to do. Okay, and that's it. That is your lesson plan. You're going to share it with me so I can give you some feedback. If you need to make any changes on slideshows, or if you need to, if I have any feedback for like what might make it a little bit smoother, or I might give you some questions to anticipate if there might be an issue or a concern that I just might notice because I've done this before and it didn't work well, or it did work well, and I can give you some tips so that it's a positive experience. Okay, what else? What other questions? Just looking through. Okay, so if you would like to look at my slides from last week, how I structured it, you can click here and you can look at the slides. But you do not have to have your slides look like mine at all. It's just a model and one way of looking at it. And I'd love for you to put your own perspective or images or style. I just want to just make sure that when you're making the PowerPoint or slideshow, that the tone of the colors and the fonts match the tone and ideas that you're teaching. And, just to make sure that we're always balancing, especially with the content that we're looking at here, the trauma or the difficult things that are happening in the text, but also the joy and family and history and pride in these as well. And so thinking about the text examples that you use and thinking about the tone that you have in the visual images and the tone and the colors and the font of the slideshow, just making sure all of that is really consistent and sets the tone that you want for your students or for your lesson. Okay, so that's it. That's kind of a really long way of me to talk through the lesson plan. But I hope that, this is useful to you. So when you get to a section, work on it, maybe pause the video, listen to my video, go back in. Places that are confusing to you, please tell me, like, this is confusing, I'm not sure. Can you make another video on this, a separate video on this? That would be really great too. Any kind of feedback that you have for making this meaningful and helpful. But again, we're taking some chances, we're trying things out. So it's okay if you're a little uncomfortable or unsure. There isn't an exact science to this at all. Like we just use your creativity, use what you know from your English classes, from your other methods classes that you've had. And we're just trying to make a positive experience for everyone where we are learning the content, we're learning the skill, we're thinking about our identity, we're thinking about our community of learners here, and of course, we're thinking about the students that we're going to be teaching someday. So I hope that this was helpful. Thanks, everybody.